So hi, I'm Gabrielle Mancini. I'm the Economic Development Manager at West Berkshire Council, and my colleague Sean, who is our Public Protection Manager, is here as well. So he's going to piggyback on the end of my presentation so that you've got slightly more comprehensive information about the support that we're able to offer as a local authority. So hopefully that will add some value for you all. I'm just trying to start that. So can you all see that in kind of presentation format?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So I shall just get, I shall just get going. So I've just kind of done a very quick slide there, which I will circulate to you so you can take a look at it more clearly. But it just gives you a bit of an idea of the impact that we've seen locally. And so what it is, like the scale of the challenge that we're responding to. So it's likely that around 15% of our businesses are in those most impacted industries. As we were hearing earlier on, retail, leisure, hospitality, and the supply chain to those businesses. And so, that's not a great picture. It's not as bad as many other areas of the country, but it's still a challenge that we've got to respond to. And just picking out another figure in and amongst that. So our universal credit claimants in West Berkshire were only at around 1.5% in February, and that peaked at 4.1% in August, which is still below the national average. However, that's a very significant jump, so something that we are going to have to be looking at and responding to locally. So just a few of the things that we were doing during the first lockdown. So we were one of the only authorities in the country to defer all business rates for April and May to all businesses, regardless of the industry they're operating in. And that's something that did release kind of immediate cash flow to local businesses. So although they do have to pay it back flexibly, I might add, they had kind of cash in their pockets when they most needed it and didn't have to worry about giving it to us, which was helpful. So cumulatively, we put nearly £30 million worth of grants out to over 2,200 local businesses. So grants of between £5,000 and £25,000, depending on the size of the business. And we've just been issuing advice, guidance, social media, print media, website information throughout, as well as signposting to fully funded business advice through the Berkshire Growth Hub. And so if any businesses who are here tonight or who you are aware of wanted to be signposted to help on kind of HR, legal issues, marketing, any of those things, it's a fully funded service that I can signpost you to without any problems. So we have been looking at two recovery phases through from the pandemic. The first of which is around trading safely while we're still subject to restrictions. And so, as you'll know, in Hungerford, we've done some kind of a few bay suspensions and some kind of cordoning off to facilitate safe queuing. Also over in Newbury, we did pedestrianisation and some road closures. We've done new signage. We've looked at how we can streamline any regulatory functions that we have in order to help businesses to trade more resiliently. An example of which is around kind of speeding up tables and chairs licenses, which can be subject to a standard planning application under normal circumstances, but we were kind of whizzing those out within a week or two. More information, the kind of plethora of information and leaflets and everything we've been chucking at people, as well as posters to display in their windows to help them to comply with guidance. And then the Public Protection Partnership, which I know that Sean will touch on in a second, has been supporting businesses to put practices into place to become COVID secure and to give advice on the guidance where it can be a little foggy, because as we all know, there have been some instances where it's not quite clear what we should be doing. And so Sean's team have been kind of designated experts in that regard. Just another shout out for the Growth Hub there. They've been providing further advice on top of what Sean has been offering in terms of if a business has to change how they're operating, the legal implications and all those sorts of things. And again, we're looking at employing further officers in Sean's team to ensure that that advice can be given in as timely a way as possible, so that businesses can kind of get going the second they've been given the nod. And we're also obviously looking at how we can mitigate the long-term impact of that. And I know that Helen was asking about independent businesses and retail. And so we're looking at putting together a fund to work with our town centres other than Newbury in order to help them, because I mean Newbury has a business improvement district, our other towns do not. So we're working with the chambers of commerce where they exist, as well as our town and parish councils to develop initiatives to drive footfall, which is also likely to accumulate in a wider campaign, which we intend to fund, looking at encouraging people to shop local online while they have to, and to shop local in person when it's possible to do so. And fingers crossed that will be from the 2nd of December. I'm crossing everything. I don't think I can do a lockdown Christmas either. So we're also refreshing our current economic development strategy. So we will be looking at what else we need to be doing as a local authority to help businesses to survive the current situation and then to continue growing once we've moved past it. So that's something that will be out to consultation again, probably early next year. So please do look out for that, offer us your comments and give us your reflections on how we could better serve the businesses in Hungerford. There's the Kickstart Scheme, which I know Karen's going to be talking about shortly, but is something that we're acting as an intermediary for as a local authority. We'll also be looking at where there are opportunities to submit funding bids to the LEP or to central government for skills-based initiatives, placemaking initiatives, anything to do with the town centre that we can look at getting that boost that some of our town centres need. So we're being very vigilant about any calls for central government funding bids. We are looking at what else we can do to improve digital infrastructure, because so many people are working from home. Round about a third of the jobs in West Berkshire can be done from home, which is quite a high rate when compared with other areas of the country. So it's something we need to be looking at improving even further. And there's just a few other things about the National Career Service that we are part funding through the LEP. But again, if any of these things you'd like some more information about, please do get in touch. So the grants that Laura did touched on earlier on, there are 2 of those available. The first of which is for businesses that have been required to close by law until the 2nd of December. And so we've got £2.2 million to distribute to businesses from that fund. And the amounts allocated are based on the rateable value of the property that they occupy. So we've opened up applications for that as of Friday. We've had about 250 applications already, and we're processing them within a day or 2 and getting those payments out to businesses. And unlike last time when the grants were available, the top rateable value for properties is not capped. So those larger properties, and I know you'll have some of them on the high street with perhaps some of the, I'm thinking probably, I reckon some of the pubs on the high street might not have had them because they're big properties on a valuable area of the town. So this time they would be receiving those grants, which is really good news. And the second of those is an additional restrictions grant. And we do have discretion over this one. So we haven't actually got our local policy in place because we're still waiting for guidance from central government. But essentially that's going to be around awarding additional funding to those local businesses who have had not much support, who have experienced significant hardship, and who we know are of great value to the area and we want to see helped out. So we've got 3.17 million for that. which does have to last us at the moment until the end of the 2021-22 financial year. But as soon as we've got a policy up and running for that, I'll be in touch with both Karen and Penny so that that's disseminated, so that any local businesses in Hungerford that were eligible can get their applications in and can get the support they need as quickly as possible. Right, so I won't touch on Kickstart because I know that Karen's touching on that, but we are acting as an intermediary if any small businesses would like to sign up. And then I've just put our contact details on the final slide, which again, as I said, I'll circulate these so that you can get in touch if you need to. But, you know, if you need advice or help on anything, we'll do all we possibly can, as we've been doing since March, because we know it's been such a tough time for businesses, and, you know, we want to help where we can. So would you like me to hand over to Sean so that you can kind of do a West Berkshire Q&A en masse, or would you rather pause there and have me answer questions first?
Shall we pause and ask you questions, Gabrielle? Because I've got one.
Yeah, of course.
And it's my show. Can you say about the big businesses have got it's not rate cap now, so some of the bigger businesses, I mean, are they aware of that? I mean, there's certainly, you're right, there are a few within Hungerford, you know, a few of the local pubs for start off on the high street were worried before lockdown. How do we get the information to help them?
So we've at the moment, the thing that we've done first of all, because we only launched on Friday, is to send out communications to kind of all media, all of the contacts we have, as well as our business mailing list. So all of that information has gone out. So I think what we're going to do is kind of leave it till the end of the week, and if we haven't seen more of an uptake in applications, because we're expecting about 1,700-ish applications under that scheme. So if we haven't seen a bit of an upturn, then we will start kind of writing to businesses individually. We know who they are, we know who is eligible, but we do need the application form in from them to confirm that, you know, because we've got to do all sorts of fraud checks under the government scheme. We've got to spotlight them and all sorts of things like that. So we do need them to fill in an application form, but we do know who they are. And we will be pursuing them individually where we don't hear from them.
Is there an address?
Is there a web page for that, Gabrielle? Derek says.
Yes, I'll send you through the link to that. It's just on our main coronavirus business page, and the application forms and the email address that it needs to be sent to are all there, as well as a description of how the scheme works and the eligibility criteria. So it is all there.
Could I just ask another question? You say this, you expecting about 1,700 applications. What is the percentage of applications you get from Hungerford? Did you have those figures? Do you know the breakdown?
I don't have those figures. I don't have those figures to hand, so I'm not sure. I think we've had a few from Hungerford. I know that I already, as soon as it was announced, I sent Emma at the bookshop an email and said, "Oh, we get your application in now." So I know that we've had a few, but I don't know. I don't know the percentage.
Okay, it's just purely an inquiry. Does anybody have any other questions for Gabrielle? Oh, Andrew.
Yeah, I've just got one question. Now the thing is that I've not needed to close my business. Being a healthcare business, I've not needed to close, but obviously we've been advised by our professional bodies, governing bodies, etc., to limit the people that we actually see. So the thing is that as a result, it's probably resulted in a 70% decrease in the amount of revenue that we're going to be able to take over the lockdown period. And we'd only actually just got back to pre-COVID situations. Is that the type of thing that the additional restrictions grant might be able to help with?
Yes. So the guidance that we've got so far, which is not the full guidance, so I'm told the full guidance will arrive with us Friday. But the guidance and the kind of steer that we've had so far is that any businesses that are ancillary to the businesses that are most impacted and have had to close would be kind of good candidates for the funding. And so considering your strong links with, leisure particularly, it's quite clear that your business would be exactly the kind of business that the scheme is aimed at.
And being honest with you, I think one of the things I would also say was interested in the growth hub, because the thing is that, being honest with you, I don't necessarily just want to look at handouts, but look at ways that I can actually recover positively.
Yeah, no, so the growth hub does the growth hub courses that they do a variety of different courses based on the size of the business and what stage the business is at. And so they will give you quite detailed instruction on things like marketing, on business planning, on forecasting, on all those sorts of things. So they are quite meaningful sources of support. And I believe that Fuel Cell Systems went on to their accelerator program from Hungerford a few years ago, and did find that it was really useful. So there are some examples even from within your community of where the Growth Hub has been really useful and has really helped.
Okay, thank you.
Jane, did you have a question? Jane Goldstein? Jane? Oh. Veronica.
Hi. Thank you thus far for the support that we've had. We're actually travel agents, so you can imagine that effectively since January there's been zilch income. Does the new grant actually affect us or not?
I suppose that interestingly, we were having this conversation because we had a travel agent from Thatcham get in contact with us earlier on this week. And just in the same way as Andrew, the fact that obviously your business and your industry is so clearly impacted, and that you would very clearly be able to demonstrate how significant that impact has been. Businesses like yours, again, would be obvious candidates for that level of funding. I mean, obviously you'd have to go through the application process, but it is people like you that we're wanting to target with any discretionary support we can give out, because you've quite clearly been impacted in such a significant way. And, there isn't necessarily a light at the end of the tunnel for when you can go back to normal. And, we'd be idiots. We'd be idiots if we didn't recognize that. Again, I can't confirm what the discretionary fund is going to look like quite yet, but just rest assured that travel agents have certainly been in the group of businesses that we have been discussing as quite clearly needing support.
Lovely, thank you.
Now, Jane, do you want to ask something? No.
I'm good, thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, Gabrielle, is this grant available to all businesses, or is it just businesses that are normally subject to business rates?
So it is. There will be a component of the funding that is not tied to rateable value. Yes. So we have been discussing that there are some kind of self-employed people, particularly who are operating in industries that are ancillary to those that are most impacted. So, supply chain for retail. I mean, the conversations we've been having about wedding DJs and kind of bakers and caterers, it's, the problem that we've got is that the level of funding that we've been given is supposed to last until the end of 2021-22. I mean, I can't say whether or not the government won't release more depending on what happens. But we have been told that we have to try and stretch it out. So we will be targeting it at those who have felt the closest possible impact. So all I can say really is that we're working on getting a policy together and to getting applications up and running as quickly as we possibly can. So just look out for that. And we're trying to be as comprehensive and to capture as many local businesses as we can, because we want to help everyone. We want to get the money out. We don't want to see anybody fail, and we don't want to leave anyone behind. So we'll do all we possibly can, but we've only got the money we've got at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Gabrielle, can businesses, I mean, you're talking about this money is available. It's not a lot of money, is it? When you think about it, 3.17 million to last 15 months. If can businesses make more than one application during the year?
So, I mean, if they could demonstrate that the hardship was ongoing, possibly in theory, I'm not quite sure how it will work yet. But I mean, with the local restriction support grant, so the 2.2 that's open already, that money is that's to last for the month. That's to pay people for closing for a month. And so in the event that there were additional restrictions and additional lockdowns, we'd get more for that particular one, because we'd get more in that fund, because those are the businesses who have been told, right, that's it, you can't do anything. If you see what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Fiona?
Oh, there we go. Hi, sorry. So I am a small local business. I feel like a really small fry amongst all of this, because I'm a personal trainer, and I haven't always been a personal trainer, so it's quite a new business. I started in 2017, so I'm not flourishing, because the way I advertise myself is more word of mouth than being massively, wanting to be online training and all that. I'm a one-to-one person. So I've obviously had to stop the personal training on first lockdown. Then we were starting to get back into it, where I'd organise, because I can do it from home. I do also do it from the gym, as a self-employed person. So what I've in effect done is just, you have to stop everything, and I just don't spend anything, and I lean on my husband. But I'm just finding now that I've got professional expenses, like being part of your reps membership and things, the annual things coming up, and I'm sort of like, almost because I keep my business accounts separate, but that's I'm always got nothing to pay what I need to pay just to function. Although I don't have rent, so I feel like a small fry in this, because I don't have rent and I don't have massive expenses, but I do have kind of no income.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, obviously, again, we've got to wait till we've bottomed out the scheme, but that yours is a business that's ancillary to the leisure industry, so it does tick that box. You'll be able to demonstrate that you've got ongoing costs with your professional membership fees, etc. So that's demonstrable hardship. So in theory, the way that we're hoping to go would see kind of personal training businesses covered, because they have effectively had to close because the leisure industry has had to close, and you don't have a rateable value because you don't operate from a business premise. But then this scheme, in contrast to the schemes that we were administering back kind of April, May, June time, it's not exclusively tied to rateable value. So that doesn't necessarily matter in the way it did, because you can still demonstrate ongoing costs and the fact that you have been unable to operate.
Yeah. Thank you. That's good to know.
Do we have any other questions for Gabrielle before Sean has a few words? No, thank you very much, Gabrielle.
Brilliant. So just by way of background, public protection. So public protection service is called a public protection partnership across the three authorities that we cover, but effectively it's a shared service. It covers West Berkshire, Bracknell, Forest and Wokingham. And it covers that for training standards, environmental health and licensing. So it's quite a big service, and obviously responsible for working with about 450,000 residents, but also 10,000 plus businesses. I just want to talk very quickly about the approach that we take, as this is relevant to the way that we've dealt with the whole coronavirus outbreak and our role in that. So the approach we take is exactly the same as the police, which is, and we have done this for quite some while, which is this national intelligence model. So we seek primarily to prevent harm where we can, to encourage compliance, to work with businesses where we can. But ultimately, basically, we do end up with some aspects of our work which are around enforcement. But also within that, in between all of that, is the building of a kind of intelligence picture. And when I talk about intelligence, I'm talking about information, the information that comes from Gabrielle and her team and others, basically about the help and support that businesses need. We've had quite a big role in this from the beginning, actually, and probably not necessarily until recently that heavily recognised. But actually, we have two aspects on this. The first is the health aspect. So from the early days of this, we have been responsible for monitoring outbreaks. So all of the outbreaks in workplaces across the 3 authorities that take place are notified to our service, and we gather that information on behalf of West Berkshire, but also in Bracknell and Wokingham. We then have a responsibility for investigating outbreaks. Now, in some aspects, they're carried out by other colleagues in the council service. In schools, they're carried out within the education department. If it's in settings like care homes, and obviously adult social care are also involved in those. But the rest of the time, most of the outbreaks in workplaces, we actually basically, I talk about investigate, that we look into. And the primary reason for looking into those outbreaks is to see whether there is any link or any lessons to be learned from the businesses, for the businesses, I should say, in ensuring that there are no further outbreaks or onward transmission. We also have a responsibility, and we've picked up, this is in the West Berkshire area, around care home assurance visits. So obviously the issue of care homes in the first wave was very significant locally. Following that, we carried out a whole range of visits on behalf of the CCG to care homes, basically to look at the steps and measures that were in place to prevent, hopefully, but to try and basically reduce the risk of further outbreaks. More recently, and in fact last week, the local tracing started. So this is the tracing that takes place where the national tracing scheme has not been able to get hold of people. And we have been, as a service, running that for West Berkshire, developing over the last few weeks, launched last Thursday, and that's a 7-day service now that runs 9 to 5. And we're looking at very quickly extending that perhaps into evening tracing. Because we're fully expecting, I think, perhaps in light of what Laura was saying as well, that some of that tracing work will come down to local authorities, perhaps a bit more of it. The other two significant areas for us, and one of them, the last one probably is the one you're most interested in, is the issue, first of all, of events and gatherings. So we were doing an awful lot of work over the summer period as the economy started to open around events, and we were working with a range of people offering things. Now, a lot of those were quite small scale. They were amateur sports events. They were things like, we had things like the Medicine Festival over at the Wasing Estate, but they were quite significant at the time, given that we'd come from several months, basically, of nothing happening in this sector. And we had others that were planned, basically, to take place in the run-up to Christmas. A number of them were cancelled a few weeks back, or a couple of weeks back when the latest national restrictions were put into place. But it's included everything really, from the type of events I've talked about, like the festival, just down to things which we would never have got ourselves involved in, apart from basically a few safety issues, or looking overviewing safety issues, things like Remembrance Day events, because right now we have that responsibility around any gathering of people. And then finally, the provisions affecting business. So if you go back, I won't go through all of these. These dates are probably ingrained on your, if you run businesses as you do, these dates will be ingrained. But I mean, I remember every one of these. So we had that responsibility going all the way back to the initial lockdown in March, where environmental health trading standards become the enforcement body for those areas of law. And then gradually, as we went through the summer, and you'll see the list there, basically there was various aspects opened up at various times, and we were involved in all of that. And then through basically till the September, October time, when things like the hospitality provisions came in, the medium tier provisions came in October, and then all of a sudden, we were doing all of this work around that. Then all of a sudden the announcement came with very little notice. that we were going to go back into the national restrictions at the beginning of November, because our aim up until that point, and it still is our aim, because I think that it's right. I think it's very likely we'll head back to something like tier 1, and our aim throughout that has been basically to try and keep the business sector within tier 1 for as long as possible. Because obviously in the current it's not ideal, but it obviously had the lowest level of restrictions. And and I do know, talking to colleagues or talking to people within sectors like hospitality, that they were starting to get at least some degree of trade back through the door. So the approach that we've taken, going back all the way to what I was saying about the national intelligence model, so we have provided advice. So much advice. I mean, we have literally had hundreds, maybe thousands of inquiries over the last 6-8 months, basically from businesses across the areas that we cover. And that has been from every sector, from, I mean, just the sectors that are on here today. So people who were dealing with events, hospitality, everything, personal trainers, dog groomers, you name it. Basically, we have received calls basically each time the law has changed about how the legislation applies to them, and it has been a lot of things like so other people that provide mobile services, things like mobile hairdressers, that type of thing, is a whole range of services, and we've provided thousands of pieces of advice in that period of time. We also have done it through the website that we've gotten up at the end of this kind of presentation. I'll leave you with the details as to where that is in the social media feeds that we've got. And then we've run very sector-specific briefings, so particularly around ahead of reopening. So we ran briefings ahead of retail reopening back in June. We did so with hospitality, and we did so particularly around the changes in hospitality back in September, and we plan to do so again going forward into hopefully towards the end of this month. The difficulty we've often had with all of this is the legislation has come very, very late. And actually, it's not unusual for the legislation not only to come late, but certainly if you look at the legislation that came in September, it was actually published hours after it came into force. And this has been a constant challenge for businesses. I know, basically, because although there have been guidance issued, there have been kind of hints of what that legislation was going to be. We were never quite sure, basically. And my background as a training standards officer is founded in law. Basically, we always wanted to really see the legislation so we could get the advice right. We've provided a lot of visits as a result of the changes, and actually for the first time well, not for the first time, but certainly throughout my career, I mean, I've never seen so many requests for us to actually visit businesses. So we had years of being basically asked to stay away from businesses, the whole red tape challenge, the whole red tape stuff. But actually, we provided an awful lot of reassurance visits to businesses where they asked us to go in perhaps and have a look round ahead of opening. So that happened particularly a lot ahead of retail and hospitality opening. Those visits really were aimed at two audiences. And it was this triangulation between the role of the local authority, the role that Gabrielle has talked about, the role that my service provides, and two factors really. One of them is obviously basically that businesses wanted to do the right thing. We know that. Although we have an enforcement role, we've had to use those enforcement powers very few times. I mean, we have used them, and we have issued prohibitions, we have issued penalties. But we do know that basically there has been a big desire within the businesses, certainly in the areas that we cover in West Berkshire, to comply with the law. So what we've tried to do all the way through is to provide both the support for business, but the reassurance to the public, because we saw this is very important, that basically that the public could have confidence that the business was doing what it needed to do to reduce the risk. And this was particularly important in retail and hospitality settings. We now basically, we at each stage following a change in the law, we've carried out compliance visits, and they've included daytime and evening visits actually. And they've quite often been done alongside, for example, colleagues from the police, following up allegations, and we've had a large number of allegations basically levelled around business operations. I have to say the vast majority of them I think we've probably found to be unfounded, but in the current climate we have found ourselves checking a lot of those out, and occasionally, as I've said, basically some enforcement actions, particularly around things like closing times or businesses that were open that shouldn't have been open, basically where we had to close the businesses, and there were, but most of what we've dealt with really, I think, are in the kind of the nuances in the law, and all of you will have dealt with the law and looked at the law as it changed, and say we've had so many changes, but there's so much scope in a lot of this for interpretation. So, you know, even something as simple as click and collect, what does that mean? You know, we've had dozens and dozens and dozens of inquiries in the last couple of weeks about what that means for a business if you want to continue operating. And certainly this time round, it does feel a bit different in the sense that we are finding that a lot more businesses have stayed open and are trying to make something of things like click and collect or pre-order. So even businesses, I noticed, business like Waterstones and that, basically you're actually open and you can order and go and collect from the store door. But that has there's been a lot of inquiries about that, and we continue to try and answer those inquiries as we can. And when we do get answers to those things, basically what we do is we publish them on our own website, or put the information out through to the public through the social media feeds and through basically briefings for the local media as well. So just very last slide, really, just what's next? Well, we don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful. I really am hopeful that that we get to the point where we at least get back to perhaps tier 1 in December. You know, I feel talking to the businesses, and I've done a lot of conversations, you know, over the internet and webinars and things like that, and just conversations really, that basically some sectors were starting to pick up a bit. I mean, I know that there are others that absolutely, you know, like travel agency that we've just talked about, which are very, very almost seriously impacted. Same with some of the businesses that we deal with through licensing, unfortunately. So sectors like taxi, private hire, very, very badly impacted. And unfortunately, basically, all we can do basically is provide as much kind of advice and support as we can for those businesses, but there's not a lot more we can do. Basically, they are just so reliant on things like offices being open, on travel happening, airport runs, you know, and obviously hospitality is the key one for that as well. So we've got that coming up. We'll continue to work with businesses affected by the change in terms of the provision of advice. We are looking going forward in terms of some visits further back through the distribution chain, actually, because we're learning all of the time from some of the investigations that we do into outbreaks, that actually we want to look at a bit more at things like warehousing and distribution, and particularly as we run up towards Christmas, where basically they may have increased staff numbers, temporary staff, agency staff, and just look at what's going on in those premises. And we have it again where we've had outbreaks in manufacturing settings and things like that. Basically, we will continue to provide advice for that. Continue basically the compliance visits, and those compliance visits will be aimed at reassurance for the public, for the business. And that's the way that West Berkshire has chosen to approach the high street reopening stuff in terms of this, but also the COVID marshal thing. So we're not looking to have people, we never have looked to have people walking up in the high street with making sure people were stood 2 meters apart. It was always about being able to say to the public, look, we're working closely with the businesses. We know that the businesses are doing everything they can to comply. You can be assured that we are checking these things. You can be comfortable and confident to actually use the businesses, and hopefully, basically, that then has the economic kind of impact that flows from that. Continue our work around investigations of outbreaks. A bit more work we're looking now basically into care homes and the new requirements in relation to visiting. And then, of course, as I say, the implementation of the December changes. So on this last slide, I'll leave this with you. These are our contact details. Lots of information there. We're briefing it out as soon as it comes into us, with every sector, from letting agents through to retail, through to individual things like, you know, farms and everything. Basically, it's all available in one place there. And as I say, the key thing from our point of view is we would like to hear from people if they want advice, if they want to visit, if they want to talk to somebody, just no matter how minor the point. But basically, we would ask people to contact us. So that's it. Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you very much, John. Can I just ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate you being going to see businesses and helping them and advising them about what to do to be, make the public safe, etc., etc. But some of these small businesses, they can't afford to put up, big perspex screens and things like that. Has there been any financial help for small businesses with regards to that? I mean, where could they access, or can they access any funds to help them become, COVID safe?
Gabrielle, do you want to pick that point up? I'll come back to some of those provisions in small settings, because the point you make is a really important one. I mean, we bought some perspex screens at work just so that we could basically deal with some of the things that we were dealing with, and I know how expensive they are. But Gabrielle, on that point, are you able to pick that up?
Yes, I mean, nothing additional has been made available to us to distribute for adaptations. I know that there are kind of sources of lending that will be very favourable in terms of rates, but unfortunately at the moment there aren't any further adaptation grants available. I mean, it's something that the Growth Hub may be able to kind of help signpost to, because there are new schemes being launched all the time depending on industry. So it is worth kind of contacting them and, double checking whether or not there is anything for individual businesses. But unfortunately at the moment, the grants we've been given, I mean, some of them, I mean, the ones that we were distributing earlier on in the year were for between £10,000 and £25,000. So they were kind of relatively substantial grants that businesses could have used. But I know obviously the reality is that many of them will have used them just to cover costs, and that was all they could possibly do. But unfortunately not at the moment. And I know it is really frustrating. And yeah, there's not really much more I can say on it, unfortunately.
Okay, maybe that was one for Laura.
Yeah, so if you need to kind of push for more money, because we can always kind of dish out more money if we're given it, but obviously at the moment with adult social care and everything that we've got on our plates, there's never enough to go around and do all the things that we'd like to do.
Andrew, you've had some question?
Yeah, it's actually not anything for Gabrielle or Sean. It's more of an offer because obviously because of the industry I'm in, I actually get substantial discounts for certain levels of PPE, whether that's visors, masks, gloves, whatever. So the thing is, I'm actually more than happy to open up to any member of the chamber who is actually needing some help to get things for them. I've got no problems doing that. It's a case of we need to help each other at this time. For Sean's benefit, it's just so that you know that they are all accredited. There's not any Chinese imports which are not dodgy.
I mean, it is funny you should say that, Andrew, because I mean these are the areas where we've been drawn into so much additional work around PPE and in fact, actually, I mean, as a service, very high levels of additional work around what we would call business as usual. So we get obviously many thousands of service requests a year, but actually the impacts of some of the other things that happened, like for example, closing the tips, saw an increase of hundreds and hundreds of bonfires. People being at home showed a significant increase in domestic noise nuisance. And there was just these knock-on effects that basically happened, but we got a decrease in food poisoning. So it was, and we were working towards basically, and we continue to work with the businesses to do that, because all of these things are interlinked. You know that they are. It's such a complex setting. We know, for example, that businesses where often that are involved in things like food hygiene issues or things like that are businesses that are struggling. And that's when basically corners get cut. and that type of stuff. And so we've got this thing where we just need to keep the cycle of dialogue open, try and support where we can, and you know, and again with the event stuff, hopefully it will come back. It will start to pick up again. I mean, the event that I talked about was very successful. We're thinking, oh, we did well. It was only a few hundred people, but you know, we were starting to show that we could prove. We were starting to prove that we could do these things, and then of course it started to all pick up again. So.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
That's my message, really. Basically, contact us. Please contact us if you need anything in terms of advice, even if it's just a look around a premise or a business, just to give that reassurance.
Yeah. So thanks, Karen. But the offer's there for any member. I'm more than happy to help. They are from accredited sources and of various, and they're. To be honest, if we look around, a lot of anything for personal protection, there's a lot of reasonable things out there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of companies that are, price fixing is probably too strong a word, but the price is elevated.
Yeah, again, going back to the beginning, I mean, going back all the way back, I mean, the price gouging, as I think it's called, became one of the words of 2020, get price gouging. I mean, again, it was significant. I mean, it was a real issue to the point where the government, I think, were probably days away from legislating.
Yeah.
You know, but we haven't seen that, thankfully, this time round.
No, not so much. But yeah, Sean, we probably should catch up anyway, mainly because of I have another role within the UK. From a
absolutely, just give us a ring, Andrew. No problem.